Welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here in Harlem, New York. As you know, New York City is still dealing with the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it hasn't stopped the music, and it hasn't stopped the musicians and the fans coming out and supporting the music. What better way to kick off the reopening of Mesro here in New York City is a dynamic pianist who has won 2 Grammys. He's a composer as well as an educator and is a critically acclaimed orchestrator and arranger, the great Alan Broadbent. Now, Alan has a brand new record which is entitled Trio in Motion, which is now available on Savant Records. And he goes back and pays homage to some of the great trios, jazz piano trios that he grew up listening to, ranging from the great Oscar Peterson to the great Errol Garner and Ahmad Jamal. Tonight I had a chance to sit down to break bread with him to talk about this recording. We reflect on one of our favorite pianists, the great Dave Brubeck, as well as talk about his collaboration with the great Pat Metheny on his current album, where he's done some arrangements as well as orchestrations. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mesro's reopening, featuring 2-time Grammy Award winning pianist Alan Broadbent, live at Mesro, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. it's been about maybe 5 years since we sat down and broke bread. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, Brian. It's great to see you. You don't look a day older.
Man, you too. You know,
I can't tell with one of these on.
I know everything is this COVID. How have you been handling these last 6 months during this pandemic?
Well, I guess like everybody else who is a musician, I practice every day. I write every day, whatever I can. And I'm fortunate that I have half a dozen students from NYU that we Zoom with and talk about music. So it's keeping me alive and things like that.
You know, I have to ask you, you know, during this pandemic, with the practicing and shedding, do you think that once everything comes back to normal again, you think your music, as far as your composition writing and your composing and your playing, is going to have a whole nother outlook?
Well, I might have a little more technique. Yes, I think so. I've been listening as well, so it's, in a way, it's rejuvenating even at my age to discover things and just get more better.
You know, we're on the same page as far as musical heroes. When I was growing up as a kid, my grandfather exposed me to a record called Jazz Goes to College, Dave Brubeck. And Brubeck has something very special in your heart musically.
Well, Dave, he came to New Zealand when I was 14 years old. And that was a completely new experience for me. I'd been playing Chopin and whatever until then. And they had this feeling, Paul Desmond had this feeling to the music. And I just needed to discover how to do that. And I learned Dave Brubeck's music, and then from there it developed when I met other musicians to listening to Bud Powell and Bird and Monk and all the greats. So it developed from Dave. Yeah.
What was it about Dave Brubeck and Paul Desmond, their chemistry? What was it about them that made them the quintessential group of the 50s and 60s?
Well, I don't know. It's just that I found a melodic swinging content to Paul. It was Paul that I listened to mostly to figure out how to play lines like that. That's what interested me. And Paul even said how he loved Dave's comping, and I learned to comp horn players through Dave. I wasn't especially enamored of his punching style, but there is one album from that period that I listened to that was one of my favorites, and still is, called Gone with the Wind. All the spirituals and things that they did. But Dave is particularly subtle there, with always this swinging content.
You know, you have a project that's getting ready to come out, which is in honor of Mr. Brubeck.
I'm very fortunate that I had a backer who financed a whole string album I did in Abbey Road with the London Metropole Orchestra, about almost 50 strings, and my trio with Harvie S and Peter Erskine. And we've been waiting for it. The pandemic kind of put the kibosh on it, but we're hoping it'll be up for Dave's centenary. And I did all these older songs that he was known for. You know, when I was young, you know, I'm blanking on them all, but they're very beautiful songs. Weep No More. And I tried to put my emotions into it and go back to how that music first moved me and try and express it with all these musicians.
Did you go into songs of his landmark, meaning like Time Out, like Strange Meadowlark and Take 5? Did you do some of those? Did you dig deep in those?
You mentioned the one I was trying to think of, not Take 5. We did Blue Rondo a la Turk, only because it's especially adaptable to string players. They loved it, and it really turned out well. But the one that killed me And the one where I actually learned my harmony was from Strange Meadowlark. And it features the concertmaster, David Juritz, who is, I mean, it was just an incredible experience for me, because I asked him, you know, he was standing there in front of the orchestra, David, do you want to overdub it? Because, you know, just in case or whatever. He says, no, let's do it. And I had this gentleman standing behind my shoulder here while I'm conducting the other 40-something strings. And he starts to play, and I almost collapsed. It was so beautiful. And, you know, it's not about me. It's about this music that we're trying to make together. And David gave it 100%. I'm truly proud of it. He was my skylark. Or Meadowlark, at least.
Meadowlark, yeah.
Yeah. So, and there are other beautiful things on it too. So I'm glad to be able to honor Dave on his centenary. I met him a couple of times, and he seemed to know who I was. So, what goes around comes around.
That's right, most definitely. Alan, do you feel that Dave left a very important mark as a composer or a piano player? Because he came in at a time when the piano or the pianist, the trio or the quartet, you had Ahmad Jamal, you had Oscar Peterson, you had these great piano players, these virtuosos, but I remember him more for his compositions in time.
I agree with you completely. Dave had his own special way of playing the piano and playing rhythmically. But as I said, I listened to Paul. I knew that Paul had something, that I needed to learn how to do. And that eventually led me to Bud Powell and Charlie Parker. Bud, especially because he was the link to make the piano sound like a horn. You know, Dave is always playing the piano, and there's a lot of guys that play the piano, but it's those piano players that sound like horn players are the ones that move me most, and I can follow their melodic line right to the end, you know. So that's Bud's greatness, because he took early Earl Hines, single notes, and Nat Cole, especially Nat Cole, who translated his singing into his piano playing. And then Bud, of course, took it to the absolute apex of feeling for the eighth note, which I try to instill in my students, that special feeling for the eighth note that jazz has, that makes it swing and go forward, you know. You can try and attain to be Mozart if you like, you know, but it's got to have that wonderful eighth note skipping feeling.
very, very powerful and very moving 6 years since the last time I spoke. And one of the projects that I want to congratulate you and your collaboration is with Pat Metheny on his current record. What is it like working with Pat? And also, Gil Goldstein also contributed to that record also.
Yes, that's true. Well, Pat's a very special human being. He came over to my place in Orange, New Jersey, and we hung out for an afternoon, and he presented me with the tunes that he wanted me to arrange. See, he's always thinking. He said he tried arranging things himself for the orchestra, but he just didn't feel like he had the chops to do that. And he entrusted me and Gil to take it upon ourselves to respond to his existing arrangements for his group. And I think I did pretty well. He responded. The thing with Pat was that once he's committed to it, he leaves the arranger alone. Okay, I trust you. Now you put your 2 cents in. And once I'm able to do that, I feel free and able to express how I want to write, and not as if I'm being commissioned to write for somebody else the way they want, you know. So that was a joyful feeling. I didn't get to go to LA to hear it being recorded, but Pat, in his graciousness, called me at the session and let me know. You know, because the composer's arranger is always on tenterhooks. You know, is it going to be okay? Because it's all in here. How is it when it's out there? So, yeah, I was very honored to be a part of that project.
You told me something earlier that you take time to play piano and then you take time to write. What comes first, the writing or the technique part of playing?
Oh, well, the technique part of playing is me practicing scales and whatever I do to keep the muscles working. But I think the composing and writing, which comes from internally, I can, after many years of experience, I can interpret it on the piano without it being a piano. Before, it took me a long time to break away from writing at the piano because I didn't know the sounds like I was supposed to. But when I sit at the piano now, when I place my hands on the keyboard, I can think of the horns, the French horns, or a body of strings, or an oboe. I know the colors that I'm playing. And sort of when I improvise, I'm thinking that way too, even though it is the piano. Again, it's related to playing like a horn player and being expressive as a pianist, but the bottom line is having that beautiful, continuous melody.
I'm looking at your work over the last 30 years. You're up there in the great echelon of great composers and arrangers. You're up there with Nelson Riddle.
Wow.
You're up there with Oliver Nelson. I mean, you have taken popular music, jazz music, even classical music, and you've brought it into modern terms in this generation.
Well, if anything, I've always tried to apply it to jazz. It don't mean a thing. Even when I'm writing for Natalie Cole or anything, my harmonic sense is jazz, and my Dave Brubeck chords and stuff. So many performers don't like that. It's a bit too dense or, I don't know, complicated for them to sing to. But when I have a singer that understands and trusts herself or himself to interpret the song with my, what I like to call a sub-song underneath. There's my song as an arranger, and I mentioned Skylark or Stardust with Natalie. So there's these two things in counterpoint with each other, so I can subliminally do my thing while supporting the singer, which I know from accompanying singers anyway. So.
It's funny you said Skylark because I was going to ask you, you arranged and conducted one of my favorite Abbey Lincoln records. Yeah. And she sings my favorite song, Skylark, with you. What's the role of an arranger, composer and being an accompanist? Is that hard? Because you're doing like three things to accommodate a vocalist that you may have chemistry with, or you may not have chemistry with.
Yeah, I think that's what I was just trying to explain, is that I have to know and they have to know that they already have a chemistry, a feeling for the way I write. Otherwise, I have to step back and think to myself, well, what would they like? And, whereas somebody like Nelson Riddle or that was their profession. That's what they did, and they were great. They could be all these things. John Williams can be everybody. He can be Prokofiev. He can be Stravinsky. He can be all these styles. But I am stuck with just one style, and usually people approach me that want that from me. So there you go.
Did you study a lot of classical?
Oh, I've loved the classical orchestra since I was a boy. And as I said, it's taken me a long time to understand it, not as a piano player, but to understand the orchestra as an instrument in its own right. So I don't know how many jazz pianists in the world there are that revels in Parsifal or Mahler's Seventh Symphony. It's just part of my life, the orchestral side of my life. But playing-wise, I'm not a classical pianist. Although during this pandemic, I figured before I croak, I systematically, about one a week, have gone through sight reading the Beethoven sonatas. And I just finished 31 last night. I've got one more left. I mean, I play them so dreadfully, but to understand the music and to be close to Beethoven in his tender moments, in his furious moments, this human being that reaches out 250 years ago to me, you know. That's the joy of music, as Bud Powell reaches out to me.
teaching at NYU, and I always ask the elder statesmen of the music, are you happy with the way the younger musicians are gravitating to the history as well as the application and playing the music moving forward?
Well, I get students that they choose me. So I am very honored that they want to learn like that. They might have certain difficulties about understanding certain things, but I'm interested in their interest, and it's my job to spread the word to them, you know, through these great artists. And we even talk about Wagner, we talk about, you know, Shostakovich as well. It's all up for grabs in order to make them a more comprehensive or an aware musician. Because we are, in the end, if they come to me, we are musical. We are different. We are musical people. And it's up to us to learn from being musical how to communicate it to people that are sensitive, intelligent listeners.
We lost a very important composer and lyricist during this pandemic. He wrote Suicide is Painless.
Oh, you're talking about Johnny.
Johnny Mandel.
Yeah, I knew Johnny pretty well when I was in L.A. I worked for Johnny a few times. And he was, it was his scores when I was with Natalie Cole, his unforgettable scores. I had them all available to me as a conductor for Natalie and her pianist. So I had these suitcases full of Johnny's arrangements. And finally I could apply my classical knowledge of the orchestra to how to write for standards and things, because there it was. I had to open up a score. Oh, that's the way Johnny uses this and that. And I premiered one of his most beautiful songs with Irene Kral called You Are There, which went on to be one of his most well-known songs. Not very popular in terms of the business, but practically every jazz singer knows the song, and it is gorgeous. So, yes, also Johnny influenced me as a composer of songs, and I have a whole songbook with a dear friend, lyricist and great vocalist who lives in London. Her name is Georgia Mancio. We also already have a CD of our songs called Songbook, and we have a duo coming out in about a couple of weeks called Quiet is the Star, and it's the two of us that I recorded in London with her last year. So I'm very proud of those because they're within the tradition of the standard song, but I truly believe they add to the canon and not in no way are imitative. And they have their own special quality that I believe is deep and beautiful. And you can't take away one note from any of them.
That's right.
As a piano player, what are you hearing when you're playing? What kind of colors are you hearing? What kind of chords are you hearing? Or you're trying to interpret when you hit those 88 keys?
Oh, that's a bit daunting. I don't have time, really, Brian. I am going from a note-to-note experience as I was made aware of by Lenny Tristano, who taught me Lester Young and the basics of improvising a line from beginning to end. So it's that note-to-note thing, that organic thing of a phrase that breathes, goes up and goes down, and has a rhythmic jazz quality to it, combined with my experience as a pianist, like with chords and movement and rhythm and all that. So it's a combination of things. But basically, I'm just winging it. I'm diving off the deep end every time, because I truly don't know what I'm going to play next. There are plenty of guys that have arrangements, I call them big band trios in a way, but because I have the orchestra already, when I come to play jazz with a trio or something, I am more interested in being in the moment. I do not know. It's very dangerous. I do not know how I'm going to play the song, if it'll come out right or anything. But it's exciting, and it's always new to me. So, and that's the joy of it. This spontaneity, and, as I said, being in the moment. So.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here in Harlem, New York. I'd like to personally thank and congratulate the talented Mr. Alan Broadbent for his time. Make sure you go out and buy his brand new CD, Trio in Motion, which is now available on Savant Records. You can buy it on iTunes as well as Amazon.com. Also, you can buy it at Apple Music. People, please go out and support Alan in his upcoming tour. For more information, you can visit him online at alanbroadbent.com. Also, people, if you're in New York City, please support Mesro. Mesro is now open on Thursday through Sunday, and they do 2 shows. For more information, visit their website at mesro.com. Also, people, please like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on The Pace Report here on YouTube as well as Vimeo. Also, visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, reporting live from Harlem, this is The Pace Report. If it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.